Cool. So the next person who's going to speak is going to be Andrew Ingram, and he's going to be talking about festival Wi-Fi. Please, could you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm the owner of High Tide Group. I was at UKNOF well before COVID. It was a platform that actually helped me launch my ISP. I came here and spoke to lots of friendly people, and they put me in the right direction, and we now run a small ISP in the northeast of England. My talk's definitely not as technical as some of the talks that's been on, but you might find it interesting. It was we've done this presentation in a few places, and different audience react to it differently, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. So, oh, wrong way, I think. Yeah, there we go. So we got approached by a local festival to provide wireless to cover their festival, because since COVID they'd went contactless. They tried running the festival once, and it didn't quite go to plan, with everything being contactless and the local mast being a little overloaded. So they contacted us and said, can you provide wireless across the festival? And we run a small WISP across some marinas. We've done multi-occupant buildings and stuff, and we thought, you know what, it's a festival, it's outdoors, there's no walls and stuff, it should be relatively easy on paper. So the background was, it's a local family-run festival, not big bands, it's lots of interesting events. There's a science tent, for example. You can go in, the kids can actually solder and create their own little circuit boards they leave with and stuff. It's very, definitely different to some of the big festivals. They asked us to provide ticketing at the ticket offices, bars, for the vendors, and some emergency phones and stuff on site, so that, you know, when a child's lost, they can phone the parents and say, look, we found your child, come and collect it. And the fact that it all went completely contactless for the event, there wasn't a cash machine or anything on the event. The stress to us basically, this needs to work. So the background of the slides that I'm covering is very high level what we did and some of the issues that we ran into on it. So the original plan, so we got sent this great little map, and we thought, excellent, this is going to make life a bit easier. They've highlighted where they want wireless and how the whole thing was set up. We went and did a little survey to see how big the trees and things were, and it all seemed relatively straightforward for us to do. So we planned about 4 days for the build. That's how we turned up. It was really, really bizarre to see. We turned up, and that was all that was in this massive field. And over the space of 3 days, it's converted from that to a full-fledged music festival. It was quite bizarre, and then in 2 days, it's gone as if nothing had been there. So what we did, we actually took a Starlink with us, because a lot of the systems we had were cloud provisioned and managed. So we thought, let's take our Starlink with us so we can get initial connectivity for when we're actually building the event before we get the backhaul wireless link in back to the main link. The original setup was to put, at the high point of the site, a sectional antenna, which we'd then pick up from key locations around the site, which would then connect to the client access radios, which is what the users would connect to. And you can see on there, behind the sectional antenna bit, the little ovals as to where they've actually identified as requiring wireless. However, their diagram wasn't quite as accurate as we'd have liked it to have been. When we turned up, we put our radios in, and then on day 2 and 3, vendors started turning up. And what we found is some of the vendors were about 120 meters away from the actual access radio that we put in, because they decided last minute, oh, we'll bring some more vendors along, we'll just extend the vendor area, and didn't tell us. Fortunately, we decided to bring a few extra radios, so we were just able to whack it a little bit on the end and went with it. We've done it 2 years in a row. The first year, we had huge amounts of problems with traffic. And when we eventually tracked it down, we found that, bear in mind, this is supposed to be used for contactless payments, you know, a bit of EPOS and stuff, that over the 3 days of the festival, we pulled over 2 terabytes of data from Netflix. I don't believe they do card payments or EPOS, but we pulled an insane amount of data from them. And what we eventually tracked down is a lot of the families just give the kids the tablet whilst they were running their stall, and the kids were there quite happily playing away on Netflix. A person in their caravan even had their Xbox with them, all running across the wireless network. Surprisingly, it worked, but it's not really what we'd provisioned it for. So this year we decided to do a little bit differently. That each vendor, when they signed up to it, got given, in effect, a 2-user connection. So they had their own username and password to connect to the wireless. If they needed more connections, they had to pay for them, because obviously the festival has to fund our time to run the festival, so they need to get funds from somewhere for that. And that allowed us to massively reduce abuse of the network, and also meant if there was a particular bandwidth hog on site, we were able to actually identify who they were based on the username. We also had a number of, like I said, tax summing on the end. We learnt, and there was times where there was a number of in-flight changes that were required on this one, where they'd neglected to mention it to us. So one particular vendor turned up, and a very well-known household brand, and they were measured. They obviously have to pay to be at the event. They measured how successful their stall was based on the number of mobile app installs of their app. Now, you're in the middle of a field, 4G's not working. They weren't very happy. They're like, we're going to be penalised for this because we've only managed to do about 4 app installs. Bear in mind, there's 10,000 people here, and everyone's getting frustrated because they couldn't install the app. So we very quickly built them a little hotspot on their radio, give them a set of tokens that lasted for 5 minutes. So it actually boosted their sales, because everyone kept saying, I can't get my updates from Facebook, or my emails aren't coming through. They connected to the hotspot, had to install the app, which boosted their sales, but it allowed them to get their emails in the small space of time that they're on the network. So that actually worked really quite well, and they've asked if we could potentially spill something like that into the next year. There was then the most craziest one of all is, again, there was one of the events came along in which you would listen to a story as you walk through the forest. Now, even if 4G worked, walking through a forest isn't going to work particularly well. So they had to initially put the app into a mode in which you could offer it in offline mode, was their first issue. And then they were like, okay, well, we've got 35 people every half an hour coming along. They need to download this app with the audio files to go with it, and then they can go off for the walk into the forest. So again, we had to very quickly provision a little hotspot somewhere on the site, so that every half an hour, when 35 people, you can always see what's going on, because there's the pole with the radio on it, with like a circle of 35 people around with headphones on, all downloading this app, ready to go on a walk through a forest. But again, it worked really well, and the network actually coped with the additional load. We were a bit worried about it, but it actually worked pretty well. So the initial setup, so that's actually one of our polls that we put in place. So the plan was 3 days worth of setup, because there was only 2 engineers, and we never quite knew what to expect. Thursday was supposed to be turn it all up, make sure everything works, and then Friday 8 a.m. people start arriving to site. The whole festival runs. That was the actual plan. The actual timeline went horribly wrong. That was my son on site getting a bit stressed. We did the setup, but we didn't have any power. The electrical company who was supposed to be providing power to it only turned up with 2 electrical engineers. I think, again, underestimating the scale of it. And they basically just didn't get... At 8:15, bear in mind the doors opened at 8 o'clock. We didn't actually get power to the ticketing officers until 8:15. So they were having to basically just validate paper tickets. It was a bit of a nightmare. And when we started getting power online, we then had all the radios, because we hadn't had all the radios on together. We had some channel conflicts and all sorts of stuff. Friday was just a day of hell, really. Which meant the Wi-Fi team, the electrical team, we were really not good friends at that point. Festival starts running. We then have generators on site just randomly start tripping, which takes chunks of the site offline. People are just saying, all these vendors on this side's gone off. The electrical team's then trying to figure out which generator's gone, who are they connected to. So they phoned us and said, which part of your wireless network's gone off? We were able to tell them which part of the networks had gone off, so they were able to figure out which generator they needed to go and reboot. So what it actually ended up meaning, we ended up being quite good friends, and being really good friends with the bar staff, which meant for the rest of the weekend we didn't pay any drinks, because we were able to keep the wireless on. So what we ended up taking from this, and we've learned going into following years, is to keep the network as simple as we possibly can. initially we thought, oh, can we put redundant links in, and we could put spanning tree and all these nights ago. No, just don't even. It's just not worth it. It's there for a couple of days. If something fails, just go and shimmy up the pole and reboot it. Take lots of spare kit with you, because every time we've went there, we've always taken a few spare radios thinking, are we going to use them? Pretty much guarantee we've always used them. Mesh can be your friend. So some of the technology we've used is mesh, which has been really good that once the network's live and you find there's a little black spot, whack a mesh node in. Yes, it doesn't do great throughput, but you're talking EPOS, you're talking like minuscule amount of data. What we've also done is segmented the network. So there's different SSIDs for bars, traders, and vendors and stuff, so that when the vendors start pulling too much and the bar staff start complaining things are running slow, you can easily put a quality service rule on them, turn them down, limit their bandwidth to keep the more important services running. You know, a music festival without a bar doesn't go very well, but a music festival where it takes you a bit longer to get your hot dog, you know, people can cope with that. Always have a backup link. So we had a link to this local school, gave us our main internet. That had a small problem, and we ended up running pretty much 2 days on the Starlink that we took with us. It was only there for initial build, but it was a very quick set it up and make it work. We also found a lot of card readers are still 2.4 as opposed to 5, which was a bit of a nightmare for us because it meant we ended up very congested on the 2.4, just because some of the little Zettel readers and stuff are still 2.4. And then some pictures from the festival. As you can see, the top left picture, that's our little hut with the Starlink on, and you can see how the whole thing converted. That was what we turned up to. There was that in the field and nothing else. I think that's about it. I think is there. Oops, yeah, can't really see it, but our last festival we ended up with over 1,200 connected wireless devices. Which isn't bad considering it's only supposed to be a few EPOS terminals, but I think it's the 35 people every half an hour downloading the app is what put our numbers up. But the whole thing went pretty well, and it went so well they've asked us to go back next year, so that's always a good sign. Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you.